So I guess one of my first questions has to do with how much you think the minimum wage increase on its own, without all the other changes, is going to really affect your scheduling, staffing, or just general expenses here at the hotel with respect to the actual end pricing that the consumer is going to see.
Okay, so yeah, that's a few questions.
Okay, sorry.
But no,
One thing
that's
at a
fine.
time.
So I'll start by the scheduling. I don't think that in our environment we're going to be cutting corners to try to save money, because we have a quality product that we're very proud of, and we got to stick to those standards. Our customers are expecting a certain level of quality. So at the end of the day, we're not going to use less people because it costs more. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make business sense at all. So that's answer number one.
Okay.
On that question. The answer number two is that very clearly, yes, there's going to be an increase of costs. It's very clear. Big corporations, will mumble because it's going to cut into their profit margins, but big corporations really won't care. They'll still pay, and it won't make a huge difference. I think the smaller businesses are going to be a little more affected, I think, because ultimately there's going to be an increase of costs, so you've got to pass it on to somebody else. And I think that's your third part of the question, yes, where we can imagine that payroll being one of the biggest chunk of money in any profit and loss statement or budget, that you're going to have to definitely try to increase some rates somewhere. So a big company like Walmart or whatever, you know what, it's going to be lost in the mass, and it won't really make a big difference, even though there will be still some consequences. In our case, we have a certain amount of rooms here, and you would argue that somehow we're going to have, just like we would do with a renovation, a new project, a new building, or new carpeting, etc. You'll have to unfortunately pass it on. So I don't know if it will happen in this particular case. It will depend on what our owners are going to say, but I'm assuming that businesses of the size of this one would certainly have to, unfortunately, do something about it. I see restaurants, for example, printing new menus.
Yes, already I've been hearing they're in print right now.
So they're already increasing their rates with new menus, and simply because they're getting ready. So the idea is not to make more money. The idea is to cover our costs to a certain extent, and to simply remain profitable at the same level. And that, I think, is where there might be in smaller businesses some sort of challenge to try to figure out, so do you pass it on to your customers or not? One thing, and I don't have the answer to that question, one thing I can tell you is that we will not jeopardize quality by saying, hey, we're going to hire 1.2 people because it's as expensive as 2 before. That's not gonna happen. We gotta. I think most companies that are proud of their product and their services will maintain that level of quality, and that's not negotiable. So are we going to be more creative in some instances? Are we going to be more careful, more cautious? Are we going to control more? You bet.
Yes.
And that's what I was saying about competition in general, is that this is another very competitive approach, is you're going to realize, okay, yeah, maybe we need to start watching energy consumption more. Maybe we need to start watching some of the suppliers more. Are we getting double dipped on some items that we're buying? I think it's going to force a lot of companies that are, I think, smart in the way they run their business to pay more attention to their business. So in that particular perspective, I think it's pretty cool, because it's going to force us to say, yeah, okay, this is going to cost us more, therefore we need to save more somewhere else. Is it going to be the way we operate, or passed on to the customer at the end of the chain? I'm not sure. Everybody will look at it differently. I think there's a great opportunity to first look at your own organization and figure out how you can do things.
I think so. There's other changes that are also going to be coming into effect this January, so quickly. One has to do with the 48-hour notice that's going to be required for cancellation. I don't think that you would probably have too much of an issue. I know restaurants tend to have a little bit more of that, where their schedules are constantly changing. I mean, when your rooms are booked well in advance. So I don't think it's going to affect you the same. The other one has to do with the personal emergency leave. Now, basically saying that now they're required. Basically, I forget how many days it is over the year with the full pay. I don't think it changes that much, and again, I don't know if it's something that you think is going to affect your industry at all.
So, I think it depends which operator you are.
Okay.
So we here at Marriott, but also because it is managed by Atlefic, which is the management company that takes care of this hotel, we believe in creating long-term relationships with our employees. So any social improvement, if you will, when it comes to those rules that's coming along, we will look at, of course. We will abide by the law, of course. But we are very open-minded about the fact that what we're trying to do is to create a partnership with our employees, and we're trying to work together in a win-win situation. We're not trying to cut corners. We're not trying to be the kind of the whip and the carrot type of approach. No, we're trying simply to say, hey, we need to work together. We need good quality at the end of the day. How can we help you as a team member to get there? If the government is implementing some extra rules that really make sense and that we'll have to follow, then we'll follow them, because at the end of the day, we're working in a partnership with our team members. We're not, paying people on the side or asking people to do illegal things. No, we're doing it the right way because we're a serious operator. Mm-hmm. The brand requires it, our management company requires it, and that's the way we conduct business. We are ethically, completely transparent, and we do what needs to be done, but we also do what is right. So some of those rules might, make things a little more complex, and we'll have to be more creative on figuring out how we implement it. But at the end of the day, most of those rules are helping people that cannot survive on the $11 and whatever it is right now. So at the end of the day, you've got this minimum wage thing, which we know you cannot survive on. So the concept of increasing it, I think, is good. I think what I would argue is that it's going maybe a little too fast, too quickly,
yes,
or too much too quickly, if you will, and that's where I think that there's still some discussions that should be going on, and still some argument that could be made about, yes, the concept is smart, we get it, we understand, but that fast? I mean, come on, seriously. So is it a political thing? Is it do we need to get it done before? Whatever, I don't know, and I'm hoping that's not the case, because frankly, for the smaller businesses, the mom and pops that have maybe 3, 4, 5 employees, and that are producing something or serving something, they might unfortunately cut corners, because it's their survival, right? Also,
it is. And from what I'm gathering, I've also heard similar things from almost everyone I've interviewed so far, is that it's not a question of we don't think that these employees deserve or don't deserve that increase or have these rules to protect them in place. It's more about how quickly this is sort of coming together. And I think there's still too many questions that are unanswered, but what worries me is that, everyone's on holidays, including the government, I believe, right now. So we're going to come into the fall season with so many questions unanswered, and as business owners or managers, you can't wait until it's been implemented in January to start making changes to how you do things and scheduling and costs and expenses. A lot of times part of the business management is actually doing things or planning for things in advance, and especially if you have this great relationship with your employees, it'd be nice to sort of keep them in the loop of things that are happening in time-wise.
For sure.
And I think that I'm hoping, anyways, it's very positive for me to hear how you really don't see it's going to be overly a negative thing on your day-to-day part of your business. And I think that's where there's going to be this nervousness around, and I was always concerned about the tourism industry specifically, because we're always trying to encourage tourism, especially here in Northern Ontario, and I don't want people starting to hesitate thinking they're going to lose great service or lose some of the luxury that they're going to spoil themselves with when they're away, or choose destinations differently because of it. I just don't think that's going to be fair for anybody.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, yes, it's done a little too quickly, for sure. I think, that said, just to piggyback on what you said, that there are some people that are certainly going to be affected financially much more. There's still, I mean, it's still a business. It's not a charity, right? So even though I come across maybe as maybe a little more positive than the average, the profitability is going to be affected. What I'm just saying is that there are many other ways to try to be smarter in figuring out how you're going to cover for that, rather than just passing it on to the customer, which would affect the customer again. So if it affects the customer, then guess what? You're affecting the business, then you can't employ as many people because your occupancy is not there. So I think that's what people are wondering, and the big question is always, are we going to create more buying power from those people because suddenly they're getting those extra dollars, which are very meaningful?
Yes.
But are they going to lose their job because suddenly they're becoming too expensive for some operators? And I think that's the big question, because in some instances, some small businesses are going to say, you know what, I can't handle 5 people anymore. I'm going to do everything with 4. So the productivity is going to have to increase for those 4 people, but one person is going to lose its job potentially in the process. And I think that's what a lot of people are talking about right now and thinking about. Now, if you look at what happened in the US, in cities that have implemented that type of strategy, it seems that the economy has done pretty well. I haven't come across anything really dramatically negative. I think that the ones that are not always very happy, based on what I hear and read, are potentially waiting staff that's paid on, of course, this specific wage with tips.
Yes.
Right. Well, there might be some resistance, maybe.
Surprisingly, the ones that I interviewed, not really concerned.
Really?
Because they're not going to be getting that $14 an hour increase. They're not going up to 14. They're still going to have a reduced rate.
You're quite right.
And they do mostly survive on tips. So the career servers, the ones who are doing this full time, as they're not doing this while they're going to school or in a part-time thing, those full-time servers, most of them said that they actually tend to bank most of their paycheck, and that goes towards their so part of certain expenses, but they basically live day to day on their tips. And they said as long as it's not going to affect their tips at the end of the day, then they seem to be okay with it. But it was surprising how I had a table full of them a couple of weeks ago, and they all just sort of shrugged their shoulders. It wasn't
really.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think if the rules don't change, then great.
Yep.
But it seems to me that that's something maybe the government will be looking at a certain stage also, because ultimately the idea is to please everybody. So now suddenly you're going to have some people that are making more money, let's say in a bar environment, and some people are making less money, right?
That's right.
Isn't that going to create some sort of interesting discussion within the business?
It should, but so far I think because there's still too many questions that are up. The ones who are, the minimum wage, as long as you're serving alcohol, there's and basically on seniority makes a really big difference in the restaurant world as well. But I think that wouldn't necessarily change if the new changes weren't coming in. There's always going to be a bit of that competition anyways. But it's interesting how you mentioned creativity. I think that's going to be the key, where I've noticed similar topics coming up saying that we still want to run our business. We want to run our business in a profitable way, but there's other ways to get to that end result without having to cut corners that maybe that anyone's going to feel anything right off the bat, or it could be something that's very gradually implemented in.
No, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So cross-training, for example, is a typical example that everybody talks about.
Yes, that would come up again too. Yeah.
So everybody is really excited. Nobody does it, pretty much, or very little. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is that cross-training is something that can be done in some environments. It is possible. I think people are underestimating how cost-effective that is. So I think it's going to make people think about those concepts that have existed for years and years, but that maybe one has not paid attention to. What I thought was really